It's about to get interesting, so subscribe and hit like so you don't miss the top content.
I sat in the kitchen, staring into a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The morning was quiet, too quiet, like the world around me was frozen, waiting for something to happen, but I knew it was the calm before the storm. This morning, she came back, my wife, Emily, and everything had changed. The night before, she had challenged me. We had a fight, as we've had so often lately. Our conversations grew shorter, our glances colder. We were no longer the people who had once fallen in love with each other. We had become strangers living under the same roof but in different worlds. She said she was going to a party, with friends, without me. It was her challenge. She knew I didn't like such events, that I preferred quiet evenings at home. But she went, leaving me alone in our house, which had once been filled with laughter and warmth, but now seemed empty and cold. I spent the evening alone, trying to distract myself with work, books, anything, but thoughts of her wouldn't let go. I imagined her laughing with her friends, her dancing, her eyes on someone else. I knew it was stupid, that I shouldn't think like that, but I couldn't stop. I could feel the jealousy and anger fighting inside me. Morning came all too quickly. I heard the door open, and I turned around. She was standing in the doorway, looking at me with a look on her face like she knew something was wrong. She looked tired, but in her eyes I could read a mixture of fear and relief. She knew I knew, and she knew I didn't know what to do next. We sat at the table, and the silence between us was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Finally, she spoke. She said she was sorry, that she realized she had ruined everything we had and that she wanted me to know she was sorry. She said that she still loved me, but that she understood if I couldn't forgive her. I listened to her, feeling my heart tearing apart. She talked about how distant we were from each other, how our lives had become routine, how she felt alone even when we were together. She said that this man just came into her life and she couldn't resist. She said she still loved me, loves our children, but she doesn't know if she can fix it. I wanted to scream that it wasn't an excuse, that she could have talked to me, told me how she felt. We could have tried to change things, but instead, she chose him. She chose betrayal. But I didn't say that. Instead, I asked how long it had been going on. She replied that a few months. A few months she lied to me. Some months she was with him while I thought she was at work. Some months she was destroying our family and I didn't even realize it. I felt tears roll into my eyes, but I didn't let myself cry. I didn't want to show her my weakness. Instead, I asked her what was going to happen next. She said she didn't know, that she wants us to try to make things right, but understands if I can't do that. She said she was willing to leave if I asked. I didn't know what to say back. On the one hand, I wanted her to leave. I wanted her to disappear from my life, to never see her face again. But on the other hand, I thought about our children, Lily and Jacob. How would they survive this? How would I explain to them that their mom wouldn't be living with us anymore? We sat in silence, each of us immersed in our own thoughts. I felt like I was on the edge of a precipice, and one wrong move could ruin everything. But I didn't know how to do the right thing. I didn't know how to do it in a way that wouldn't ruin our children's lives. In the end, I said we need time to think, to figure out what to do next. She nodded, but I saw relief in her eyes. She was afraid I would immediately ask her to leave, but I couldn't do that. Not now, not like this. She got up and went into the bedroom. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the cup of coffee that was still in front of me. I felt like the world was crumbling around me, but I knew I had to be strong. For our children, for myself. I picked up my phone and started texting my best friend, Mike. I told him that I needed to talk, that something serious had happened. He responded almost immediately, saying he'd be there, and in that moment, I felt a little relieved. I knew I needed someone to listen to me, someone who wouldn't judge. When Mike arrived, I told him everything, about how Emily had challenged me, how she'd gone to the party, how she'd come back and confessed to cheating on me. He listened in silence, not interrupting, and when I was done, he simply said, "You deserve better than that." Those words are stuck in my head. I deserve better than that. But what does that mean? What am I supposed to do? Fight for our family or let it go? I didn't know the answers, but I did know one thing. I don't want to be who I was anymore. I don't want to live a lie anymore. I thanked Mike and told him I needed time to think. He hugged me and told me he was always there for me, and in that moment, I felt like maybe everything would be okay. Maybe not right away, maybe not the way I want it to be, but it will be. I went back into the house, went into the bedroom, and saw that Emily was already asleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her, at the woman I once loved more than anything in the world, the woman who had betrayed me. and I realized that the past no longer mattered. All that matters now is the future, and I had to decide what that future would be. It's been a few days since that morning when Emily came back and confessed everything. Those days were filled with silence, tension, and awkward attempts to act like nothing had happened. Emily and I avoided talking, each of us immersed in our own thoughts. The kids, Lily and Jacob, sensed something was wrong, but they were too young to realize what. They continued to play and laugh and ask questions, but their naivete only made my pain worse. I looked at them and thought about how much I wanted to protect them from all of this. But how? Emily tried to act normal, but I could see her avoiding my gaze, her hands shaking as she poured herself coffee. She knew I knew, and she knew I didn't know what to do next. We're both stuck in this strange limbo where the past has already been shattered and the future has yet to begin. I started looking for answers. I read articles on how to get over cheating, how to save a marriage, how to divorce with minimal loss, but none of these texts gave me what I was looking for. I didn't want advice. I wanted to figure out how to move on with my life, how to breathe when every breath reminds me of betrayal, how to look into the eyes of my children, knowing their world was about to crumble. One night, when the kids were already asleep, I decided to talk to Emily. We were sitting in the kitchen with this letter lying between us, as if it were the third person in the room. I asked her why she had written it, why she couldn't just talk to me, why she chose to do it that way. She said she was afraid of my reaction, afraid I wouldn't understand. She said she tried to find a way to tell me the truth, but every time she opened her mouth, the words stuck in her throat. She said that writing was her way of being honest, even if it was difficult. I listened to her, feeling the anger and pain fighting inside me. I wanted to scream that she had ruined everything we had, that she had ruined our family, but instead I just sat there looking at her, feeling as if a wall had grown between us, a wall I didn't know how to break down. She said she wanted us to try to save our marriage, that she was willing to go to therapy, willing to do anything to fix what she had destroyed, but I didn't know if I could forgive her, if I could ever trust her again. I didn't know if I could ever look at her and not see what she had done. I said I needed time to think, to realize how I felt. She nodded, but I saw disappointment in her eyes. She was probably hoping I'd agree right away, that we'd start working on our relationship, but I couldn't, not right away. The next day, I called Mike. I said I needed to talk. We met at a bar, and I told him everything, about the letter, about the conversation with Emily, about how I didn't know what to do next. He listened in silence, and then he said I should think about myself, about what would make me happy. He said that children adapt, that they are strong, and that the most important thing is for me to be happy. His words made me think. I had always put family first, but now I realized that I couldn't be a good father if I wasn't happy, if I lived in constant pain and mistrust. I knew I had a decision to make, but I didn't know what decision to make. When I got home, Emily was in the living room with the kids. They were playing together and I saw her laughing. It was that laugh that I had once loved, that laugh that made me feel like everything was going to be okay, but now it sounded different to me. Now it reminded me that she could laugh like that with other men. I walked over to them, and Lily immediately rushed over to me, hugging my legs. Jacob followed her, and I felt their warmth and love fill me. They were so innocent, so pure. They didn't know what was going on between their parents, and I didn't want them to know. Not now. Emily looked at me, and in her eyes I saw a question. She wanted to know what I had decided, but I couldn't answer. Not now. I just took the kids in my arms and went with them to their room to play. I wanted them to feel safe, to let them know that I would always be there for them. I listened to her, feeling conflicting emotions struggling inside me. On the one hand, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that we could fix this, that our family could survive this. But on the other hand, I couldn't forget what I'd seen. I couldn't forget the way she laughed with other men, the way she looked at them, and I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. I said I needed time to think, to figure out how I felt. She nodded, but I saw disappointment in her eyes. She was probably hoping I'd agree right away, that we'd start working on our relationship, but I couldn't, not now. I walked outside and sat on the steps in front of the house. The night was quiet, and the stars were shining brightly. I stared up at them, feeling as if the universe was watching me, and in that moment, I realized that the most important thing was to be honest with myself, honest about how I feel, what I want, and what I can accept. I knew I had a lot of work ahead of me, that I would have to make hard decisions, say hard words, but I also knew that I was stronger than I thought, and that no matter what happened, I could handle it, for myself, for our children, for our family. It's been weeks since I learned the truth, weeks that I spent in a constant struggle with myself. I tried to figure out what to do next, how to live with what had happened. Emily kept insisting on therapy, that we should try to save our marriage. She said she loved me, that she wanted us to be together. But every time I looked at her, I saw not the woman I once loved, but the woman who had betrayed me. I decided to go to therapy, not because I believed it would work, but because I felt I had to try it. For our children, for Lily and Jacob, they deserve to have their parents at least try to keep the family together. But with each session, I realized that forgiving Emily wasn't going to be that easy. The therapist talked about trust and how it could be rebuilt, but I felt like every time I looked at Emily, I didn't see her, but the men she'd been with, and it was destroying me from the inside out. One evening, after another therapy session, I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, thinking about what to do next. Emily was in the living room with the kids, and I could hear them laughing. It was a sound that always filled me with warmth, but now it seemed foreign. I felt like I was living in some parallel world where everything looked the same, but it wasn't the same at all. I went outside and sat on the steps in front of the house. The night was quiet, and the stars were shining brightly. I stared up at them, feeling as if the universe was watching me, and in that moment, I realized that I can't go on living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when everything inside of me was being torn apart. I walked back into the house and approached Emily. She looked at me and I saw a question in her eyes. She knew something was wrong. I sat down next to her and told her we needed to talk. We went out into the backyard so the kids wouldn't hear us. I told her that I couldn't live like this anymore, that I tried. I really tried, but I can't forgive her. I can't forget what happened and I can't trust her again. I told her that I love our children more than anything and that I will always be there for them, but I can't be with her. She listened to me, and I saw tears come to her eyes. She said she realized that she had ruined everything we had and that she was sorry. She said she still loves me but understands if I can't be with her. She said she wants us to stay friends for the sake of the kids. I nodded, but inside I felt that a friendship between us would be impossible. Too much pain, too much betrayal, but I knew that for the sake of the kids, we should at least try. The next day I started looking for an apartment. I knew I couldn't stay in a house where every corner reminded me of what we had lost. I found a small apartment close to our home so I could be closer to the kids. When I told them I would be living apart, they cried. Lily asked why I was leaving and Jacob just stared at me silently with his big eyes. I hugged them and told them that I would always be there for them, that I would always be their daddy, and that I loved them more than anything. Emily and I started the divorce process. It was hard, but we tried to do things as civilized as possible. We agreed on joint custody of the children, and I tried to spend as much time with them as possible. Every moment with them was like a breath of fresh air in a sea of pain. A few months passed and I started to get used to my new life. The apartment became my refuge, a place where I could be myself. I started going to the gym, found a new hobby, photography. It helped me to distract myself, to find something new in my life. One evening, as I was coming home after a walk with the kids, I saw Emily. She was standing outside my house, and in her hands was an envelope. She said it was a letter from him, from that man. She said he was leaving and that she wanted me to know. I took the envelope, but I didn't open it right away. I just stood there looking at her, feeling as if time had stopped. She said that she was sorry for what had happened and that she hoped that someday I would be able to forgive her. I nodded, but didn't say anything. She left and I was left standing outside, holding the envelope I knew would change everything. I walked into the apartment, sat down on the couch, and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. He wrote that he was sorry for what had happened, that he never meant to destroy our family. He wrote that he was leaving, and that he hoped I could find the strength to forgive Emily. He wrote that she still loved me and that he was just a mistake. I put the letter on the table and closed my eyes. I felt tears come to my eyes, but I didn't cry. I just sat there and thought about how things had changed, about how I had changed. Now that I look at my life, I realize that this is just the beginning of a new chapter where I have to learn to live again, where I have to find a way to be happy, even after everything that has happened. And I know it won't be easy, but I also know that I'm stronger than I thought, and that no matter what happens, I can handle it, for myself, for our children, for our family. It's been a few years since I started a new life, a life that, although full of hardships, was slowly beginning to make sense. Lily and Jacob had grown up and become more independent, but they still knew that I would always be there for them. I tried to spend as much time with them as I could, and every moment with them reminded me of what I was still moving forward for. Emily and I continued to maintain a civilized relationship for the sake of the kids. We went to school events together, celebrated their birthdays, and tried to be a team even though we were no longer a couple. It wasn't easy, but we both realized it was important to Lily and Jacob. She moved to a different neighborhood, but we agreed that the kids would spend time with each of us equally. One night, as I was putting Lily and Jacob to bed, Lily asked me if I was happy. I looked at her big eyes full of curiosity and concern, and said that yes, I was happy, because I have them, because they are the most important thing in my life. I walked out of their room and sat on the couch. The apartment was quiet and I felt like I had finally found peace. I knew that there were still many challenges ahead, but I also knew that I was stronger than I thought, and that no matter what happened, I could handle it, for myself, for our children, for our family. I picked up a picture that was on the shelf. It was a family photo of us, taken many years ago. We were all smiling, and in that moment I felt as if time had stopped. I knew that the past no longer had power over me, that I could move on with my life, with them, with hope for the future, and that was all I needed. I decided it was time to move on. I started dating a woman named Emily that I met at work. She was kind, understanding, and she made me feel like myself. She knew about my past and what I was going through and supported me every step of the way. With her, I began to realize that love could be again, that I could be happy. One evening, as Emily and I sat in the kitchen drinking coffee, I told her how things had changed, how I had learned to forgive, how I had found the strength to move on. She listened to me, and in her eyes I saw understanding. She told me she was proud of me and that I deserved to be happy. I knew she was right. I do deserve happiness, and I found it, not in the past, but in the present, in our children, in new love, in myself. Now, as I look at my life, I realize that everything has fallen into place. The past no longer has power over me. I've learned to live again, to find joy in the little things, and to be the person I've always wanted to be: a father, a partner, a man who knows that happiness is possible, even after the darkest of times. And I know that no matter what happens, I can make it through, because I have them, because I have me, and that's all that matters.